Hey, what's up guys, my name is Alano, and welcome to episode number 2 at my attempt at recreating the Super Mario Bros. Game in Game Maker Studio. Last time we coded the player movement. If you haven't seen that episode, I suggest you go ahead and check it out. And this time, we'll be doing the player sprites. And as you can see, I already added mine, so I got the idle sprite, the walk sprite, the jump sprite, and the stop sprite when he stops moving. All of these sprites will be in the video's description if you want to follow along with the video. Now, one last thing I did off camera is actually change the background of the room to be blue instead of black. Alright, so we have quite a lot of coding to do in this episode, so let's just hop right into it. In the player object, first off we're going to change the sprite to be the Mario idle sprite. So in the create event, we're going to add some variables for the animation. We're going to implement a simple state machine. So state is going to be equal to idle. We're going to need some animation speed. About 0.2 is fine. Animation speed, I spelled that correctly. And finally, a variable called last state. And we're going to use this to calculate the last state we were in. That's about it for the create event. Now, if you go ahead into the step event, you can see there's quite a lot of code here, and frankly, it's pretty hard to read. So we're going to make this easier to read using scripts. So let's create the first one. We're going to call it allow player movement. And all this is going to do is handle the movement for us. Yep. Like so. So just go ahead and copy and paste all the movement code from the step event to here. And we're going to change just a bit the way this works. So we're going to get rid of the move variable right here. Let me just untap this. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the else if statement on both of the directions. And instead of checking for the move variable that we just got rid of, we're going to check for input.right and input.left. This way we have the code for the player going right and the player going left, but we got rid of the code that makes the player stop. So we're going to fix that right now using a lerp function. So I'm going to decelerate. If we are not pressing the input right, and we are not pressing input left, not left, and here it's a exclamation point, then do some stuff for us. And like I said, we're going to set the HSP to be equal to lerp HSP 0 and acceleration times 1.5. Since the lerp function is always going to get a number between HSP and 0, depending on the acceleration times 1.5, it's going to take quite some time before it reaches 0, so we're going to help it reach 0 faster using an if statement. So if HSP is smaller than 0.09 and HSP is greater minus 0.09, then HSP is going to be equal to 0. That's it for this script, so we can go ahead and save it. And if we want to move, we just write allow player movement. Like so. Before we go ahead and change anything else, we have to check the step event for the input object and remove the minus before the left keyboard check. Next up, we're going to do the same thing, essentially, but for the collisions. So let's go ahead and create another script. We're going to call it collision and moving. And we're going to give it an argument called objects. So this script is going to check for collision not only with the wall object, but with any object that we put in the arguments of the script. So let's go ahead and paste and copy and paste our collision code. There you go. Now the code here is essentially going to stay the same, but we're going to add a for loop to cycle through all the arguments we pass in. So for I is equal to 0 and I is smaller than argument count, I plus plus. And put all of this inside. Change the object wall for argument. And we want the argument named I. So go ahead and do the same thing for each of those. And that's about it for this script. And now making our player collide with the walls is as simple as calling the script we just made. So collision and moving, that was, yep, with the object wall. And that's it. So let's just test this out to make sure everything works fine. There we go, we have no compile errors. If I press left, we go left. If I press right, we go right. If I jump, we jump. And if I release the buttons, we slowly decelerate. Perfect. Now for the state machine, we won't be needing this. And instead, let's go ahead and write a switch statement. So switch for the state, that's what we want to switch. And we want 4 cases. We want case idle when we are at idle. Don't forget to add the brakes. We also, let's just copy and paste this. We also want the moving left, moving right, and jumping states. So this is going to be called right, this is going to be called left, and this one is jumping. Next, we're going to move our jumping code into the jump state. As such, let me just tab this in so it's prettier. And we are also going to put this down here, bring this up. And instead of else if, we're just going to say if statement. And instead of just setting the jump time to 0, it's going to do multiple things. So, such as, well, putting the jump time to 0, but also switching the state to be equal to last state. And I'll get back to this later. Down below, this here is going to be called gravity. Now we have a whole section just for the gravity. Nice. And just underneath, we put the collisions, like so. Back to the jumping code, we're going to change the sprite. So sprite index is going to be equal to, sprite Mario jump. So SPR underscore Mario underscore jump. And we are also going to set the image index, image speed, to be equal to 0. So we don't want to switch between all the images of the sprite. We are also going to want to allow the player movement as such. And that's it for the jumping state. So as you can see, as long as we are jumping, we can move, we can jump, and if we hit the ground, well, we change state to the last state we were in before jumping. And we're essentially going to do the same thing for the rest of the cases. Starting off with the idle state. Now we want to put the last state variable to be equal to idle. While we are in the idle state, well, the sprite index is going to be equal to sprite SPR Mario idle. As simple as that. And the image speed is also going to be 0 in this case. We don't want to switch between all the sub images. So There we go. Now, once we're in the idle state, we need a way to actually get out of the idle state, so we're going to check for inputs here. So, if input A, and if you remember, in the input object, input A is binded to the VK up. So if we press the input A, we are going to jump. So state is going to be equal to jumping. Next, if we press input, let's say a right, then you guessed it, the state is going to be equal to right. And that's how we are going to change between the different states. If input left state is going to be equal to left. And yep, that's it for the idle. The right and left states are essentially going to do the same thing, but in reverse. So last state is equal to right, because we're in the right state. Okay, we want, let's say, sprite index to be equal to SPR underscore Mario walk. We also want the image xscale, really important, to be equal to 1. Next, we want to allow the player movement, because we want to be able to move in the going right state. So there it is. And we're going to check for some inputs to change state. So if, again, I can just copy and paste here. If we press the A button, we go into the jumping mode. Now we're in the state right, so if we press the left, we go into the left mode. And if HSP is equal to 0, meaning that we are not moving, then the state is going to be equal to idle. We go back to the idle state. Let's copy and paste this for the left. There you go. Instead of right, the last state is going to be left. Here we want the image xscale to be -1 to flip the sprite around, because if you remember, we only have one sprite for the Mario walk and it's facing right. This doesn't change. Here we want it to be right because we want to change to the right instead of left. And here we go. So let's just test if everything is fine. We added quite a lot of code right now. And that's pretty nice. So we change sprite when moving. If we jump, we go into the jumping sprite. All right, that's nice. And if we stop moving, we go back to the idle. Now, it does work, but while we're moving, the sprite isn't animating. And that's what we want. We want the sprite to actually animate. So let's just do that right now. And it's actually rather simple. Just below the allow player movement in the right and left, we're going to copy and paste the same code. We're going to set the image speed to be equal to the absolute value of HSP. So if it's positive, it's going to return positive. If it's negative, it's also going to return positive. Divided by the max speed that the player can go to. And we're going to multiply this by the animation speed. Now, all that does is make the character animate depending on what speed we go. So the faster we go, the faster it animates. And let's give it a try. Right, that's working. Nice. Now there's only one last thing I want to do before we leave. If you remember correctly, when Mario goes one way and suddenly changes direction, he has some sort of a braking motion, just like the sprite stop here. So we're also going to implement that before ending this video. We're going to change the sprite index here to be SPR Mario stop, but only if HSP is actually smaller than 0. If HSP is smaller than 0, that means we are going left. Now, if we're trying to go right while going left, the sprite is going to change to SPR Mario Stop. Else, meaning that HSP is now greater than 0, we're going in the right direction. We're going to simply change the sprite to be equal to SPR Mario Walk. So sprite next is equal to SPR Mario Walk. That's it. So let's copy this code here to the left. And instead of smaller, we want it to be greater. Let's test this one last time before we leave. And here we go. It's working. Nice. We can jump, we can move, we try to stop, it stops, and the collision still works. So yeah, that's about it for this episode. Next time we'll be doing the first level of the game using tile sets, and I'm pretty excited for this one. It's going to be fun. Don't forget to leave a comment below if you have some trouble with the code or you want some general help. Also, don't forget to leave a like if you want more videos. You can go support me on Patreon if you'd like, and see you next time.